I've been in the sun this whole time. So if you come in at night and flash like that in the middle of the night, it's as if the plant thinks it's been in daylight that whole time. So it's crossed the critical period. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's what happened with the poinsettia experiment. That wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And so if you are growing plants and you need them to flower at a certain period through the year, if you understand this process, then you can manipulate that to some extent if you know what you're doing. Questions on the short day, long day experiments here? Like how long? I think one report I read, I think they said 10 seconds was enough. Yeah. So it's not very long at all. Which kind of makes you think, like, around town, when the street lights come on, and that could cause a problem. Headlights from the car, they've done studies on that too, especially the newer. Oh, some of the headlights are bright. Is it just me? Oh, at night it's like, would you turn your brights off? And then I don't even think they're brights. They're just really bright, regular lights. You know what I mean? They're not the bright light or the high beams, I should say, high beams versus low beams. They're really bright low beams. Um, so that can affect it. Even they've done studies with a full moon. Hey, isn't it tonight the harvest moon? It already happened? Yeah, crap. Oh, the Hunter's moon, right? And it already happened? All right. So even on a full moon, really bright full moon, you can get an impact. So kind of bizarre. In fact, I think I have a slide in here where I did some research, tried to find what people have been doing on that. This is another one that I show in Plant Kingdom, just to kind of get across this idea that flashes of light in the middle of the night can really cause a big shift in whether or not they're going to flower. And so here, this is a long day plant. So that means the light period has to pass the critical threshold. So the dotted line again is the critical threshold. And it did. And so this plant went beyond the critical light. And so it's going to flower. But if you go below the critical light, which is being shown in the next one, it doesn't flower. But then they came in and said, let's have fun with it and start flashing lights in the middle of the night and see what happens. And so they did that red, far red, kind of like with the seeds, the lettuce seeds that I talked about last time. And so basically they figured out that the plant's paying attention to the last quality of light. And so here with far red, what happened is the P sub FR form got converted to P sub R. And so the plant thought it was in light all this whole time, all the way to when they got hit with far red. So now it's like, oh, I've been in light, so I'm not going to flower because I'm a short day. Or a long night. I mean, sorry, long night. Or short night. I'm getting it mixed up. I keep doing that. So here with the far red, when it got hit with far red, it didn't flower because it thought it was in the dark. There we go. Whereas here, it thought it was in the light. So if you hit it with red light in the middle of the night, basically you're turning the phytochrome in its tissues into the P sub FR form. And it thinks, oh, I'm in light, so I'm going to flower. So it thinks it's been in light this whole time, basically. But if you come in and say, I'm going to hit it with red and then far red, it thinks just the opposite, and it's going to decide not to flower. So this was one of the earlier experiments with they were doing it with the lettuce seeds, as I showed earlier. And then of course they're really interested too in flowering. And so they're playing a lot with how is the phytochrome involved in this flowering process. And then they figured out that there's these different categories of plants. So it was a lot of hard work because they didn't realize that some plants prefer long days and some prefer short nights. But that's when you start thinking about it, it does make sense because when you are out all spring, summer, fall, and you're out hiking around, I mean, you do see different plants flowering throughout the length of the growing season. So clearly they're in different categories. They have different preferences for when they're going to go ahead and flower. And so the phytochrome is giving them, the ratios of the phytochromes are giving them that information along with a lot of other cues. So this is when I did a little bit of research, they had looked at artificial light like street lights, car beam lights, and even really bright home security lights can mess with that too. They did like landscape lights, those really low, dim landscape lights in your that are especially low to the ground. Those don't seem to do much, and like more dim porch lights, not the security lights, but the regular porch lights seem to be okay. So they are definitely noticing how humans are impacting how plants are completing their life cycle just by, light pollution, I suppose. That's why, well, I don't think it's really for the plant sakes, but have you noticed that some of the lights around town, they used to be the globe lights that would emit light, it was pretty much in every direction. And now when they take those out, they're replacing them with down lights. And that's trying to reduce light pollution, but that's more for, I think, animals and insects than it is for plants. Nowhere in their explanation did they say, we're doing it for the plants. So I think it's more for other organisms, unfortunately. Okay. So I encourage you to look through and kind of think through this process. We're going to need to explain it on the exam in a couple weeks. So please get comfortable with it. We'll talk a little bit more about this in context with some of the published research that's going on. So that may help as well. Questions on phytochrome?
But did you have examples of the intermediate day plants, like with that, like where it's like, is that specific to each plant in that category? So like it says, you put like one not flower days, which were too long.
Yeah.
And on the.
They tend to, a lot of grasses, like native grasses or lawn grasses tend to be in intermediate day category. Ooh, I'm guessing at least the ones, majority of orchids are tropical or subtropical, so they're probably day neutral. That would be my guess. But like the lady slippers up here, I'm not sure because they're adapted to this area. They usually flower in the spring though, right? I believe, right? Does anyone remember the lady slippers that we have here, the terrestrial lady slippers? It's in the spring, right? Yeah. So they're probably short day plants would be my guess. Oh, July. Hmm. Seems like they're earlier up here. Does it say in that what kind of plant it is?
No.
What group? The one thing about some of the crop plants is that because a lot of the crops we currently grow come from all over the world. And so knowing what category they fit in is pretty important if you're a grower and understanding how to manipulate that if you want to. And so this work on the phytochromes and looking at photoperiodism was a huge effort. There's many, many decades going into this kind of research, and probably still pretty a hot field. Okay. All right. So we have been talking a lot about the abilities of plants to have their, senses. They can sense so many things around them, and that in order to survive, they decentralize their with this idea that they don't have a brain or heart or lungs. They just spread that out. And so that quote about how they hear with their whole body, they feel with their whole body. So for many years now, as I've been thinking about plants and this decentralization and coming across different documentaries, I couldn't help but be struck with how they have a lot in common with the octopus. And by the way, I looked it up because I can never remember. Apparently, the accepted plural is octopuses, not octopi. So I put it down in the notes. So apparently, because it's Latin, not Greek, or Greek, not Latin. No, it's Latin, not Greek. No, it comes from Greek, not Latin. I always get that mixed up. But anyways, if probably most of us in the room know that octopuses are really smart. We now know that, and intelligent, and really quite capable, considering they don't have any hard shells to their body anymore. So I couldn't help, once I learned more about the octopus, that they have a lot in common with plants in some regard, in this idea that they decentralize a lot of their neuronal activity, for example. So when we were looking at plant neurobiology concepts, and this idea started way back with Darwin that, there could be neural-like systems in plants with neurotransmitters and all of that. And they honed in on the transition zone of roots. And when you think about the massive system each plant has in terms of the root system, it's really quite abundant. And this idea that every root could have its own command center, have the ability to behave in that nervous system-like manner. And you think about the octopus arms, they have 8 arms, and they all have their own neurons as well. So we were talking about, and we talked about this experiment with the sound vibrations and how the roots could grow toward the sound. They can emit their own sound. By the way, I wanted back into the bioacoustics. I forgot to take this in. The frequency that they show here, around 200 hertz, the sound of running water, and that's also, there's many frequencies in the sound of running water, but the 200 range is in there. And so it's appropriate for picking up on water, the sound of water. So I forgot to mention that explicitly. So this idea that root systems are having this ability to coordinate their behaviors, and so the swarming behavior, they're studying that really intensively right now in roots. Like, how do they know not to grow into each other? How are they behaving with respect to each other? And the more they're learning about, especially the root system, made me think more about the similarities with the octopus. And the idea of network theory. So these are slides that you've already seen, but you think about, they say the brain is just one strategy, but you can have intelligence and consciousness in other ways besides having a brain, although some people would still argue with that. And so a lot of people say, the plants just took a different route. And you have with the network theory idea, again, it's this distributed control. And so again, kind of going back to the root system in that manner as well. And so consciousness is thus not localized, but is shared throughout the plant, in contrast to the more centralized location in the animal brain. And then when you think about the octopus does have a brain, For sure, but it has more than just a brain. It has neurons that go through, in fact, more neurons in its arms than it does in its brain. And so the cephalopods were here before us. They evolved first, but the plants were before them. And then you have this idea of they believe that the octopus, the ancestor did have shells, but they've lost that. So they're all soft-bodied, which definitely plays a role in selection pressure on how the octopus evolved. Certainly gave them a huge range of movement with their body. And we see that with plants, even though they can't physically really move from point A to point B like the octopus can, but they can still move. And they say the octopus doesn't have a centralized governance because they have about 500 million neurons, and most of those are distributed throughout the body. So the brain is not the place where they have most of their neurons. And so there's nearly twice as many neurons in the arms than in the brain. And so they really think of it as it's not like the brain and then the body, it's just this one whole unit of nervous system. And when they look at how the arms behave in the octopus, they have their own sensors and controllers. So each arm can independently go through all the process of touch and taste, smell and taste. And they've even done experiments where they surgically remove the arms and they still are performing basic functions because they have their own nervous system. And so they also see that because the octopus can respond so quickly to its environment, it's actually a lot of its behavior is actually bypassing the actual brain itself. And basically, they often will say they think with their arms rather than having it have to go through the brain and get processed. It's just so quick, they can do it with their arms. And they have 3 hearts, so they're not centralizing that either. They end up with 3 hearts. And I didn't know this. This really isn't that relevant, but I just thought it was really cool. 3 hearts and using copper instead of iron. So I thought that was interesting. Makes it different colored blood. We all know that they can camouflage amazingly quickly. It's stunning. So they have photoreceptors. Plants have photoreceptors. And the skin really is very sensitive. They can sense the light and respond. So again, it doesn't have to go through the brain. It's just all happening in the body. So they often say it can see with its skin. And so they've been thinking about this way with Boquilla vine, how they're like, how can the Boquilla mimic all the tree leaves around it so quickly and readily? And so thinking of the plant body seeing, with the idea of the leaves, the way the leaf cells are structured, it can act like a visual center where they can actually see. And also, they are trying to figure out what's going on in the root system too. And so this idea, they call it embodied cognition. And there's some plant scientists that are looking at this now with respect to plants. So embodied cognition, what that means is it's our body being responsible for some of the smartness that the organism has. And it's not just in the brain. So our body structures and codes information about the environment and how we deal with it. And so again, going back to the octopus, how it has these independent arms that can behave and sense and respond and smell and taste separate from the overall brain of the animal. And so they're saying if an organism is doing or is exhibiting embodied cognition, it means that it doesn't have to have a central brain to store all this information, and that the body is actually providing quite a bit of the intelligence to that organism. And so again, I just wanted to make you aware that this is kind of a new thing that some of the plant scientists are thinking about, like could plants be fitting into this idea of embodied cognition? And the other hypothesis that they're getting into is this ecological intelligence hypothesis. So you may see a little bit more about that over the years here. So they talk about this with the octopus, and they say that, complex cognition, basically it evolved to meet the challenges. So for an octopus, predation's pretty huge because they're soft-bodied now, and they live in an ocean where there's a lot of predators that love soft-bodied food. And so they're easy target from that perspective. Well, plants are that way too. I mean, plants are soft-bodied and get chewed on, even though I know they have lignin and cellulose, but there's plenty of things that want to eat them. They can't run away. And so you kind of think about that analogy in terms of this hypothesis. So when they lost their shells, maybe the pressure of predation was so extreme that outsmarting their attackers was the only way for them to survive, and that they're exhibiting this ecological intelligence because of that selection pressure that they face. And that it is an alternate form of intelligence from what we normally think of as intelligence in vertebrates like us, or, they usually reserve intelligence for humans and, well, they get into birds, a lot of mammals, and then birds, which are also vertebrates, of course. So the argument is with this hypothesis that you can have alternate forms of intelligence. You don't have to have a brain and a backbone in order to be intelligent. So I'm going to try to dig and see if there's anything more on this in the plant realm, but they're definitely thinking about it in the octopus idea, that this is something that we should be really thinking about. And so where we once thought there was only one form of intelligence, we now know there are two. And who is to say how many more there could be? This is when they're talking about the octopus versus vertebrates. By stepping aside from our human-centric view of intelligence, we can start to clearly see the infinite possibilities of cognition. So I took those quotes from a video about the octopus. I can post that video. It's not something you have to watch. It's just if you want to watch it, it's just a short, like 8-minute video, I think. But it makes a lot of the points I just was talking about, and how they're thinking about octopus versus other intelligent vertebrate/mammals. They didn't mention plants in there, but I think the plant biologists are looking at this and going, well, wait a minute. If you're saying that the octopus could be an example of this, let's look at plants, because there's a lot of similarities in some very important ways between the octopus and the plant. So I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see if they form a position on this and start doing some interesting research with it. I'll look and see if there's been anything published. What do you think? Is there any similarity in your head to octopus versus plant? Has anyone seen an octopus, like actually been in the ocean where an octopus was? Really?
It walked. I was like, we were in Hawaii and it's like, was walking.
Yeah. So I was reading a book this summer on the octopus, and they said they do the stilt walk, I think, because swimming is so hard physiologically, that I think I have it in the notes in one of these slides. I was really surprised. Where's the one that talks about their heart? Yeah, it says one of their hearts stops beating when the octopus is swimming, which is why they often crawl instead of swim. I didn't know that. So yeah, the diversity, there's a lot of different species out there. So incredible animal. Okay, let's take a break, and then we'll talk a little bit about plant communication. So we'll stop there.